Daniel Hargrove wiped the grease from his hands with a shop rag that had seen better days. The garage was quiet now, most of the other mechanics having left hours ago. Rain drummed steadily on the metal roof, a familiar soundtrack to his life in Seattle. "Looks like you're getting the last laugh today," Daniel muttered to the stubborn Subaru he had just finished repairing. The owner had insisted nothing was wrong with the timing belt. 4 hours of labor later, Daniel had replaced the frayed belt before it could snap and cause catastrophic engine damage. He always found satisfaction in fixing things before they broke completely. His phone buzzed. A text from Helen. "Going out with the girls tonight. Don't wait up." Daniel checked the time. 7:45 p.m. The third girls' night this week. He typed several responses, deleted them all, and finally settled on, "Have fun. Be safe." The drive home took longer than usual. Traffic crawled through the rain-slicked streets, the wipers beating a steady rhythm as Daniel replayed the last few months in his mind. The signs had been small at first. Helen turning her phone face down when he entered her room. The new workout clothes, the sudden interest in smoothies and fitness classes, perfumes he didn't recognize. He pulled into the driveway of their modest craftsman house. The windows were dark. No signs of dinner. No signs of Helen. Just empty rooms waiting for people who increasingly lived separate lives under the same roof. Daniel showered, heated leftover pasta, and settled on the couch. The TV provided background noise while he thumbed through the stack of bills on the coffee table. Helen's credit card statements showed charges at places he didn't recognize, restaurants he knew weren't part of any girl's night, stores that sold things she never brought home. It was nearly midnight when he heard her key in the lock. The door opened, bringing with it the smell of rain, alcohol, and unfamiliar cologne. "You're still up. You're still up," Helen said, surprise evident in her voice. She didn't meet his eyes. "Just finished some paperwork," Daniel replied, gesturing to the stack of bills. "How was your night?" "Fine. Lisa's birthday." Helen kicked off her shoes and hung her coat, water dripping onto the hardwood. "I'm exhausted. Heading to bed." Daniel nodded, saying nothing about the fact that Lisa's birthday had been last month, or that Helen's lipstick was smudged at the corner of her mouth. He said nothing about the text message notification that had flashed on her phone screen when she checked a message from someone named R, with a heart emoji. His strength had always been observation and careful assessment before action. In the garage, these skills saved cars, and sometimes lives. At home, it was accumulating evidence of something he wasn't ready to name. Daniel turned off the TV and gathered the bills to bring to the bedroom. Helen was already pretending to be asleep, her breathing too measured to be genuine. He lay down on his side of the bed, the space between them wider than the physical inches suggested. Sleep didn't come easily. Instead, Daniel stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain and calculating the distance between what he thought they had and what was actually there. "You're a lifesaver." Alan might clapped Daniel on the shoulder as they closed the hood on the Lexus they'd been repairing since closing time. "Beth would have been furious if I told her we couldn't make her sister's wedding tomorrow because of the car." Daniel shrugged. "No problem. Just needed an extra set of hands." He glanced at his watch. 10:30 p.m. Helen hadn't responded to his text about working late. "Let me buy you a beer sometime," Mike said, grabbing his jacket. "Seriously, I owe you. I'll take you up on that." Daniel handed Mike the keys. "Drive safe." After Mike left, Daniel locked up the garage. Rain had been falling steadily all day, turning the streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. He climbed into his truck, a solid Ford that had survived nearly a decade of Seattle winters. His phone showed no new messages. Daniel tossed it onto the passenger seat and pulled out of the parking lot. The radio played something melancholy and acoustic as he drove through the green light at Morrison Street. From his left came the sudden glare of headlights, the sound of tires skidding on wet pavement. Daniel turned toward the light. Too close, too fast. No time to swerve. Impact came with the screech of tearing metal and shattering glass. His truck spun, the world tilting and whirling around him. Pain exploded in his chest and head as the airbag deployed, punching the air from his lungs. The last things Daniel registered were distant sirens and rain falling through the broken window onto his face. Then darkness swallowed everything. Beeping, rhythmic and insistent, it pulled Daniel toward consciousness, though his body fought against it. Pain throbbed in his head, his ribs, his left arm. The antiseptic smell of the hospital surrounded him. "Mr. Hargrove, can you hear me?" A woman's voice, professional but kind. Daniel tried to open his eyes, but they felt weighted. His mouth was dry, his tongue uncooperative. "You're at Harborview Medical Center. You were in a car accident. I'm Dr. Reeves." More beeping, shuffling of papers. The doctor explained his injuries. 3 broken ribs, a concussion, a fractured wrist, internal bruising. "Lucky," she called him. The truck absorbed most of the impact. The other driver, distracted by a phone, had minor injuries. "We've been trying to reach your emergency contact," Dr. Reeves continued. "Your wife hasn't arrived yet." Daniel managed to open his eyes then. The doctor was a blur of white coat and dark hair against the fluorescent lights. "Ellen," he mumbled. "Yes, we've spoken with her. She said she's out with friends for a birthday. We explained the situation, but she hasn't come in yet." "Birthday," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. Again, Daniel closed his eyes against a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with his concussion. Hours passed in a haze of pain medication and interrupted sleep. Nurses came and went. A different doctor checked his vital signs. Still no Helen. Night fell. A nurse named Lacey adjusted his IV and checked his temperature. "Has my wife called?" Daniel asked, his voice rough. Something flickered across Lacey's face. Pity, perhaps. "Not since earlier. Would you like me to try again?" Daniel nodded, then winced at the pain the movement caused. Lacey stepped out but returned shortly. Her expression told him everything before she spoke. "I reached her. She said she's still out and can't make it tonight." Lacey hesitated, then added quietly, "I told her the doctor wanted to discuss your condition with her, that it could be critical. She said to call her tomorrow." The beeping of the heart monitor quickened slightly. Daniel turned his face toward the window, where city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass. "I'm sorry," Lacey said. "Don't be," Daniel replied. "You're here. She isn't." Light filtered through Daniel's eyelids, pulling him from a drug-induced sleep. His body felt heavy, compressed by pain and the weight of what Lacey had told him. She knew. She just didn't come down. He opened his eyes to find Dr. Reeves checking his chart. "Good morning, Mr. Hargrove. How's the pain today?" "Present," Daniel managed. His throat felt like sandpaper. Dr. Reeves nodded and adjusted something on his IV. "The medication should help. Your vitals are improving, which is excellent news." She paused, glancing toward the door. "We still haven't been able to have your wife come in. Is there someone else we should contact?" "Family, perhaps." Daniel thought of his younger brother, Tanner. "My brother. His number should be in my phone." "I'll have a nurse check your belongings," Dr. Reeves said, making a note. "The neurology team will be by later to assess your concussion. For now, try to rest." Rest came fitfully. Every time the door opened, some part of Daniel expected, hoped, it might be Helen. It never was. Nurses, doctors, a hospital chaplain who stopped by briefly. But no wife. It was evening when Lacey returned for her shift. She brought him water and helped him sit up slightly. Still no sign of her. Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. Lacey's lips pressed into a thin line. "No, but we reached your brother. He's coming tomorrow morning." She checked his monitors, then said quietly, "I don't mean to overstep, but this isn't right." She knew how serious your condition was. "I made that very clear." Daniel studied Lacey's face, the genuine concern there. "Thank you for being honest. I've been a nurse for 12 years, she said. I've seen all kinds of families in crisis. The ones who camp in the waiting room for days. The ones who can't face hospitals because of past trauma. But to just not come at all. She shook her head. Maybe she's afraid, Daniel said, though he didn't believe it. The Helen he'd first fallen for. The woman who'd held his hand at his father's funeral, who'd brought soup to his elderly neighbor during flu season, that Helen would have been here. Fear or no fear. Lacey seemed to read his thoughts. Is there anything else I can do for you? Daniel considered the question. My phone. Could I see it? She retrieved it from his personal effects. The screen was cracked from the accident, but it still functioned. Daniel saw the text notifications, a few from coworkers who'd heard about the accident, one from Tanner saying he was coming. And nothing, absolutely nothing, from Helen. He checked their location sharing app. Helen wasn't at their house. She wasn't at her workplace. The map showed her at an address Daniel didn't recognize in Greenwood. Thank you, he said, handing the phone back to Lacey. Something cold and clear was crystallizing inside him, displacing the confusion and hurt. Could you do one more thing? Could you tell me exactly what you said to my wife when you called her? Daniel asked. Lacey hesitated, then nodded. I said, you're in a serious accident. You have multiple injuries, including a head trauma. The doctors need to discuss your condition with her urgently. And I paused and added that she should come quickly because we couldn't guarantee how the next 24 hours would go. That's standard protocol for severe trauma cases, even when the prognosis is actually better. We want to make sure family has the chance to be here. Daniel nodded slowly. So you told her I might not make it through the night. Lacey met his eyes. Yes, and she still didn't come. In that moment, whatever last thread had held Daniel's marriage together snapped clean. The pain medications couldn't touch the cold, hard knot forming in his chest. It was a betrayal, clarity, and the first stirrings of something else. Something like resolve. You sure about this, man? Tanner Wolfe looked at his older brother with concern. The doc said another day of observation would be better. Daniel carefully buttoned his shirt over the bandages, wrapping his ribs. Each movement sent pain shooting through his torso, but it was a clarifying, physical pain he could handle. I'm sure, Daniel said. I'm not staying here another night. Tanner ran a hand through his disheveled brown hair, the same shade as Daniel's, though Tanner kept his longer. What do you want to go to your place? No, the answer came instantly. Not there. Tanner didn't need elaboration. When he'd arrived at the hospital that morning, Daniel had told him everything. The growing distance, the suspicious behavior, and finally, Helen's failure to show up at the hospital despite knowing Daniel might not survive the night. You can crash in my place, Tanner offered. It's not fancy, but the couch pulls out. Thanks. Daniel winced as he slipped his arms into his jacket, his left wrist wrapped in a cast, protested the movement. Doctor's orders, Tanner said, helping Daniel to his feet. Take it easy. Daniel nodded, gritting his teeth against the pain. Let's go. The hospital doors slid open, revealing the rain-soaked streets of Seattle. Daniel took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. He was leaving one chapter of his life behind and stepping into a new, uncertain future. But for the first time in months, he felt a sense of control. He was taking action, making choices, and moving forward. And he was doing it alone. Dr. Reeves had argued against his decision to check out, listing potential complications from his concussion and other injuries. Daniel listened politely, signed the against medical advice forms, and asked for his discharge papers. Now, as Tanner gathered the last of his belongings, Daniel turned to the hospital bed where he'd spent the last 5 days. He pulled a notepad from the bedside table and wrote 6 words. You chose him. Now live with it. He placed the note in the center of the pillow, a white rectangle against white linen. Ready? Tanner asked, holding the wheelchair the hospital required for discharge. Daniel nodded and carefully lowered himself into the chair, setting his jaw against the pane. As Tanner wheeled him toward the elevator, they passed the nurse's station where Lacey was updating charts. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Hargrove," she called, her expression a mixture of concern and understanding. "Thank you," Daniel replied, "for everything." Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot. Tanner helped Daniel into his battered Subaru. "Helen called me," Tanner said as he started the engine. "This morning. Wanted to know if I'd heard from you." Daniel stared straight ahead. "What did you tell her?" "That I was on my way to the hospital. She said she was too." Tanner snorted. "Guess she didn't want to face you alone." "She won't face me at all," Daniel said. "Not yet." Something in his tone made Tanner glance over. "What are you thinking, Danny?" Daniel watched the hospital recede in the side mirror. The pain in his body was nothing compared to the cold clarity in his mind. "I'm thinking it's time for consequences." "Consequences," Tanner repeated. A slow grin spread across his face, the same expression he'd worn as a teenager whenever they'd planned retribution against neighborhood bullies. "I like the sound of that." As they drove away from Harborview Medical Center, Daniel felt something inside him shift. The dutiful husband, the man who fixed everything and asked for little in return, that man had been left behind in the hospital bed. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that some betrayals could never be repaired. The war had begun. Helen Hargrove rushed through the hospital's main entrance, her hair still damp from a hasty shower. She'd spent the night at Ruben's place again, a risk, but one that had seemed worth taking when Daniel was safely occupied at work. Then Tanner had called, and the carefully constructed walls of her double life began to crumble. She approached the information desk, forcing a worried expression. "I'm looking for my husband, Daniel Hargrove. He was in a car accident a few days ago." The receptionist tapped at her keyboard. "Let me check." "Hargrove." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, it looks like Mr. Hargrove checked himself out against medical advice about 2 hours ago." Checked himself out? Helen's surprise was genuine. "That's impossible. He had serious injuries. You'll need to speak with his doctor for details," the receptionist said, her tone cooling. "Dr. Reeves is on duty if you'd like me to page her." "Yes, please," Helen said, fumbling for her phone. No messages from Daniel. Several from Ruben, which she ignored. Dr. Reeves arrived moments later, her white coat pristine, her expression neutral. "Mrs. Hargrove, I'm Dr. Reeves, your husband's attending physician. Where is Daniel? Why was he allowed to leave?" Dr. Reeves' eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Hargrove is an adult, capable of making his own medical decisions. We advised against discharge, but couldn't legally keep him here." She paused. "He was picked up by his brother." "Tanner," Helen muttered. "Did Daniel leave any message for me?" Something flickered in Dr. Reed's expression. "You'd have to check with the nursing staff." "Excuse me. I have patients who need my attention." Helen found her way to the room number the receptionist had provided. It was empty now, stripped of linens, and waiting for the next patient. On the pillow lay a single sheet of paper. Helen picked it up, her hands shaking slightly as she read the 6 words in Daniel's neat handwriting. "You chose him. Now, live with it." The paper slipped from her fingers. He knew. The drive home was a blur of panic and rationalization. Daniel couldn't prove anything. She could explain away her absence, the shock, the fear of hospitals. He would be angry, yes, but he'd always forgiven her before. Daniel was steady that way. Reliable. Helen pulled into their driveway, rehearsing what she'd say. The house looked normal from the outside. The same simple craftsman they'd purchased 6 years ago. The same porch where they'd shared summer evenings. Her key didn't work. Helen tried again, jiggling the lock before realizing the truth. Daniel had changed the locks. She rang the doorbell, knocked, called his name. Nothing. The curtains were drawn. The house silent. She tried the back door with the same result, then peered through the kitchen window. Daniel's coffee mug. The one she'd given him 3 Christmases ago, with "World's Most Patient Husband" printed on it, was gone from its usual hook. In fact, several things seemed to be missing, though she couldn't catalog them all from this limited view. Defeated, Helen returned to her car. Where'd he go? Tanner's place. Probably. She considered driving there, but the memory of the note stopped her. You chose him. Now live with it. The cold finality of those words suggested confronting Daniel now would be unwise. She was fishing her phone from her purse to call him when a courier's van pulled up. A young man approached with a thick envelope. Helen Hargrove? He asked. Yes. Please sign here. He handed her a clipboard. Inside the envelope was a formal notice of divorce proceedings, along with a temporary restraining order preventing her from entering their home without supervision, and an official date for when she could collect her belongings. The final page was a bank statement showing Daniel had withdrawn exactly half of their joint savings, his rightful share. No more, no less. Helen sank down onto the porch steps, the papers trembling in her hands. This wasn't like Daniel. He didn't make impulsive decisions. He fixed problems. He didn't burn bridges. Except, it seemed, when the bridge had already been burned from the other side. You look like hell, Tanner observed as Daniel slowly lowered himself onto the couch. Sure you don't want the bed? Daniel shook his head. Couch is fine. Easier to get up from. Tanner's apartment was small but neat, surprising for a bachelor who delivered furniture for a living. What it lacked in space, it made up for in technology. Multiple monitors dominated one wall, alongside gaming equipment, and what appeared to be a small server setup. Your surveillance command center still operational? Daniel asked, gesturing to the tech. Tanner grinned. Better than ever. Why? Planning to go Big Brother on someone. Something like that. Daniel shifted, grimacing at the pain in his ribs. I need to know everything. About Helen. About him. Tanner's smile faded. You sure that's the road you want to take? Might not like what you find. I already don't like what I found, Daniel replied. But I need facts, not suspicions. All right. Tanner pulled up a chair across from his brother. What do we know so far? His name might be Ruben. There were texts from someone with that initial. Helen's been going to some fitness place and a smoothie bar, spending time in Greenwood. Tanner nodded, already typing notes on his phone. What about access? Shared accounts? Social media? We have a joint bank account, though we each have separate personal ones too. Shared cloud storage for photos. I'm still on her Instagram as an authorized user from when I helped set it up. Good start. Tanner looked up. One more thing. How far do you want to take this? Just confirmation she's cheating? Or, Daniel prompted. Tanner met his brother's gaze steadily. Or do you want to burn their worlds down? Daniel thought of the empty hospital room, of Lacey's words. She knew, she just didn't come. The cold clarity that had settled inside him at the hospital crystallized further. I want consequences, he said simply. For both of them. Then we need help, Tanner said. Someone who understands what's at stake. Someone discreet. Daniel considered this. Elena Voss. Tanner's eyebrows rose. Mason's widow. You sure? She knows about betrayal. About grief. Daniel had been Mason Voss's best friend since high school. When Mason died of an undiagnosed heart condition 2 years ago, Daniel had helped Elena through the worst of her grief. And she sees things others miss. I'll reach out to her tomorrow, Tanner promised. For now, you need rest. Doctor's orders. Daniel didn't argue. The day's exertions had drained what little energy his injured body possessed. As he settled onto the couch, pain medication dulling the edges of his consciousness, one thought remained crystal clear. He would have justice, methodically and completely, the same way he fixed engines, with precision, patience, and an unflinching assessment of what was broken beyond repair. Elena Voss set 3 coffee cups on Tanner's kitchen table. You look terrible, she told Daniel bluntly, her dark eyes taking in his bruised face and the cast on his wrist. Compared to yesterday, I'm runway ready, Daniel replied. Alina's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Like Daniel, she'd grown accustomed to using humor as armor. Tanner said you need my help with something sensitive. Helen's having an affair, Daniel said without preamble. When I was in the hospital after the accident, she didn't come. Not once. Even when they told her I might not make it. Alina's expression hardened. That's beyond an affair. That's abandonment. We're gathering evidence, Tanner explained, gesturing to his computer setup. Digital breadcrumbs, social media, financial records. And you want my input because you understand people, Daniel said. Their patterns, their weaknesses. You saw things in Mason's students that even he missed. Alina had taught art at the same high school where Mason had been a science teacher. Her ability to read people had made her both an effective teacher and someone students trusted with their secrets. She nodded slowly. Okay, what do we have so far? Tanner pulled up several screens. Helen's Instagram account, bank statements, location history from the family sharing app that Helen had apparently forgotten to disable. She's been to this smoothie place at least twice a week for the past 3 months, Tanner pointed out. Ruben's refreshment bar in Greenwood. And she's been taking fitness classes at the gym next door. Daniel added, always with the same instructor, according to her credit card statements. Guess what his name is? Ruben, Alina stated, owner of the smoothie bar and fitness instructor. Convenient. They spent hours piecing together the timeline. Helen had started a fitness challenge at her workplace a year ago. The challenge had included discounted classes at Greenwood Fitness, where Ruben taught. The smoothie bar visits began shortly after, then private training sessions, then unexplained absences that aligned perfectly with Ruben's time away from both businesses. Classic grooming pattern, Alina observed. He offers something legitimate, fitness, health, and slowly escalates the personal connection. Does he have social media? Tanner pulled up several accounts, a business page for the smoothie bar, a fitness instructor profile, and a personal page with restricted access. I can't get into his private account without raising flags, Tanner admitted. You don't need to, Alina replied. Alina said, look at his public interactions with other women who comment on his fitness posts. The same patterns, compliments on their progress, offers of personalized programs, invitations to smoothie tastings. She shook her head. Your wife isn't his first affair, Daniel. This is his business model. Daniel studied the screen, noting the similarities Alina had pointed out. Can we find these other women? See if there's a pattern to how he operates, and how it ends. Better, Alina said. We find his wife. His wife? Tanner and Daniel asked simultaneously. Alina pointed to an older post where someone had tagged Ruben Marsh and his lovely wife, Ava, at a charity event. According to this, he's married. But he hasn't appeared in any of her posts for at least 8 months, and she scrubbed most photos of him from her profile. Classic signs of relationship trouble. They're keeping quiet. Estranged, but not divorced. Daniel mused, and potentially a valuable ally. If she's been burned by him too, Alina added. Tanner looked at his brother. How do you want to approach her? Daniel considered this carefully. We need more information first. About both of them. I've got something that might help, Tanner said, pulling up another screen. Helen's cloud backup for her phone. She's never been great with tech settings. Everything she deletes stays in the cloud for 30 days. He clicked through folders until he found what he was looking for. Text message backups. Daniel steeled himself as Tanner opened the files. There they were, hundreds of messages between Helen and Ruben, spanning months. Flirtations that evolved into explicit exchanges, plans for meetings, complaints about their respective spouses. One exchange from 3 months ago made Daniel's stomach clench. When are you going to leave that mechanic? You deserve better than grease under his fingernails. It's complicated. We have the house, finances. Besides, Daniel's stable, reliable. Boring, you mean. You need passion, baby. Fire. Helen had typed, "I get that from you. I need his stability." Helena placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the cold fury building inside him. Just seeing things clearly for the first time. They continued their digital archaeology, excavating the ruins of what Daniel had thought was a solid marriage. What emerged instead was the picture of a woman leading a double life, presenting herself as a devoted wife while seeking excitement elsewhere, and a man who systematically targeted women in committed relationships. "There's something else," Tanner said, his voice tight with anger. "Messages from when you were in the hospital." Daniel nodded for him to continue. Tanner pulled up the exchange. H. Daniel was in an accident. Bad one. Hospital called. R. Are you okay? H. I'm fine, but they want me to come in. R. So go for an hour, then come back here. H. They said he might not make it through the night. R. That's just what hospitals say. Drama to cover their bases. He'll be fine. Don't ruin our night for their protocol nonsense. The next message was time-stamped 4 hours later. H. Staying at your place tonight. Don't want to sleep alone. Daniel stared at the screen, the magnitude of the betrayal fully illuminated. Not just an affair, but a calculated decision to prioritize a night with her lover over potentially saying goodbye to her husband. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's all I needed to see." Elena studied him with concern. "What's your next move?" Daniel looked from her to Tanner, his decision already made. "We find Ava Marsh, and then we start taking everything apart. Piece by piece." Ava Marsh tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she set 2 coffee cups on the table. The small cafe was quiet this early, just as Daniel had hoped. "I appreciate you meeting me, Mrs. Marsh," he said. "It's Miss Peterson again, actually. Went back to my maiden name." Ava's eyes were tired but sharp. "Your message said this concerned Reuben, and was of a sensitive nature." Daniel nodded. "My wife is having an affair with your husband." Ava didn't flinch at his directness. Instead, a bitter smile crossed her face. "I'd say I'm surprised, but that would be a lie." "Which one is she?" "The marketing executive. The yoga instructor. The pharmaceutical rep. Customer service supervisor," Daniel replied. "Helen Hargrove." "Ah." Ava took a sip of her coffee. "New conquest. I haven't heard that name before. How many have there been?" "That I know of. At least 6 since we married. Probably more I never discovered." Ava studied him. "You're very calm for a man who just found out his wife is cheating." Daniel touched his still bandaged ribs. "I've had some time to process. I was in a car accident last week. Helen chose to spend the night with Reuben rather than come to the hospital. Even when told I might not survive." Ava's expression hardened. "That sounds like Reuben's influence. He's gifted at making women choose him over their obligations, over their better judgment. That's why I wanted to meet," Daniel said, "to understand what I'm dealing with. And to see if you might be interested in some mutual assistance." "What kind of assistance?" Daniel placed a manila folder on the table. "These are copies of text messages between them. Bank records showing how long it's been going on. Evidence of Reuben's pattern with other women." He slid the folder toward her. "Might be helpful for your divorce proceedings." Ova opened the folder, scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. "You've been thorough," she said, impressed. "I believe in doing things right the first time." She closed the folder. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Hargrove?" "Daniel," he corrected. "And I'm proposing we help each other get what we deserve. You said you went back to your maiden name, but you're still legally married." Ava nodded. "Divorce proceedings have stalled. Reuben hid assets, claimed the smoothie bar was failing when it's actually quite profitable. My lawyer is good, but expensive. I'm still gathering evidence. And if you had evidence of his other income streams, of funds he's hidden." Her eyes narrowed. "I'd be very interested. What do you want in return?" "Information. primarily, about his habits, his weaknesses, the pressure points that would hurt most. Ava studied him for a long moment. "You don't strike me as the violent type." "I'm not," Daniel assured her. "But there are many kinds of consequences. I prefer the kind that come from someone's own actions returning to them." "Justice, then," Ava said softly. "Not revenge." "Justice with interest," Daniel corrected. "For what he took from both of us." Ava opened her purse and carefully tucked the folder inside. "Reuben presents himself as this health-conscious fitness guru, but it's all a front. He drinks heavily when stressed. He's deeply in debt from gambling, sports betting, mostly, and he's terrified of having his reputation damaged. The smoothie bar and fitness instruction are his entire identity." Daniel nodded, filing away these details. "Would you be willing to meet with my brother and a friend? They've been helping me gather information. We could combine what we know, coordinate our efforts. Why involve others? Why not just confront them? Because confrontation would give them a chance to spin stories, make excuses. I don't want explanations," Daniel said, his voice hardening slightly. "I want them to face the natural consequences of their choices." Ava's lips curved in a small, sharp smile. "You know, Daniel, you're nothing like Reuben described you. He told Helen you were boring, predictable. Being underestimated can be an advantage." "True." Ava pulled out her phone. "I'm free Thursday evening. Text me the details for our meeting." She stood, gathering her things. "One last thing, Daniel. Are you sure you're ready for this? Once we start, there's no going back." Daniel thought of the empty hospital room, of Helen's absence when he needed her most, of the messages revealing how little she valued their marriage. "There's already no going back," he replied. "There's only forward." City health inspectors shut down Reuben's refreshment bar today, citing multiple code violations. Elena read from her phone. Sources say the inspection was triggered by anonymous complaints about food safety and permit irregularities. Daniel nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. It had been 3 weeks since his meeting with Ava, and their plan was proceeding with methodical precision. "How long will they stay closed?" he asked. "Minimum 2 weeks. Tanner replied from behind his computer. "Possibly longer if they find structural issues." "Which they will." He grinned. Amazing what inspectors discover when they actually look. The 4 of them, Daniel, Tanner, Elena, and Ava, had gathered at Elena's small apartment above the art studio where she taught classes. The walls were covered with paintings, many done by Elena during her grief after Mason's death. They were beautiful and haunting. Landscapes with something slightly askew, portraits with eyes that seemed to follow you. "What about the gym connection?" Daniel asked. "Already done," Ava said. "I spoke with the owner, mentioned my concerns about Reuben's business practices potentially reflecting poorly on their establishment, showed her some of the evidence we compiled about his pattern with female clients." "And?" Elena prompted. She was horrified. Apparently, there had been complaints before, but nothing concrete enough to act on. What we provided was concrete. "She's terminating his contract effective immediately." Daniel nodded his approval. They'd been careful to use only legitimate means, reporting actual violations, providing documented evidence of inappropriate behavior, filing paperwork through proper channels, everything above board, yet devastating in its combined impact. "What about Helen?" he asked. Tanner asked. "Any movement there?" "She's called me 16 times, Daniel said. "Texted more than that." "I haven't responded." "Good," Elena said firmly. "Maintaining your distance is crucial right now. Let her wonder. Let her worry." "She tried to get into the house again yesterday," Daniel added. "Neighbor called me." Since his discharge from the hospital, Daniel had been staying with Tanner while renovating a small apartment above a defunct repair shop he'd purchased with his half of the savings. The property would eventually become his own garage, something he'd dreamed of for years, but Helen had always dismissed as impractical. "Has she connected the dots yet?" Ava asked. "Between what's happening to Reuben and your absence?" If she hasn't, she will soon, Elena said, especially after the next phase. Daniel glanced at the calendar on Elena's wall, where they'd marked key dates in their plan. The small claims filing is tomorrow. Ava nodded. For the money he borrowed from our joint account. It's not much, but it creates a public record and financial pressure at a time when his business is shut down. And I've heard back from that reporter at the Seattle Times, Elena added. She's very interested in the pattern of customer complaints against Ruben's business, especially the ones from women claiming they paid for fitness programs that were never delivered. She glanced at Daniel. This will become public quickly. Helen will be associated with him in the fallout. Are you prepared for that? Daniel thought about it. The plan had always been to address both betrayals, Helen's and Ruben's, but in ways fitting their specific actions. Ruben had built his life around a false image of health, integrity, and success. Exposing the reality would destroy what he valued most. Helen had prioritized appearances and social standing, using Daniel's stability while seeking excitement elsewhere. She would now face both the loss of that stability and public association with Ruben's disgrace. I'm prepared, Daniel confirmed. They chose this path together. They can face the consequences together. Tanner closed his laptop. There's something else we should discuss. I've been monitoring Helen's communications. He held up a hand to forestall questions. Nothing illegal. Just the accounts she never logged out of on shared devices. And, Daniel prompted, she's getting desperate. Ruben's blaming her for his troubles, claiming someone from her work must have reported him to the health department. They're fighting. She tried to stay at his place when she couldn't get into yours, but he turned her away. A flicker of satisfaction crossed Daniel's face. Good. Anything else? Tanner hesitated. She's been contacting your friends, trying to figure out where you're staying, spinning a story about being worried about your health after the accident, playing the concerned wife. Daniel nodded, unsurprised. Helen had always been skilled at managing perceptions. None of them know anything, Elena assured him. And the few who might guess aren't talking. What about her job? Ava asked. That's the next pressure point, correct? Elena nodded. I have a contact in HR at her company. Everything's ready for when we decide to move. Daniel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The pain from his injuries had subsided to a dull ache. But the deeper wound, the betrayal, remained raw. Yet with each step of their plan, he felt something rebuilding inside him. Not forgiveness, certainly, but perhaps a path forward. We've disrupted his business and damaged his professional reputation, Daniel summarized. Cut off her access to stability. Now they'll turn on each other. He turned back to the group. It's time for the next phase. Ruben Marsh slammed his phone down on the counter of his small apartment. 3 weeks without income from the smoothie bar. Contract terminated at the gym. Creditors calling daily. And now this, a summons to small claims court from Ava, would make matters worse. Helen had become a liability rather than an asset. Her increasing panic about her missing husband and being locked out had gone from annoying to alarming. She'd shown up at his apartment twice, the second time causing a scene that had his neighbors talking. His phone buzzed again, a text from his attorney. Reporter from Seattle Times called again, asking about customer complaints fitness programs. Need to discuss ASAP. Damn it. Ruben kicked a nearby chair, sending it skidding across the floor. Everything was falling apart. He couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't random bad luck. The buzzer for his apartment sounded. Through the intercom, a man's voice announced, "Delivery for Ruben Marsh." Ruben pressed the button to let the courier in, then opened his apartment door. A young man in a delivery uniform approached with a large envelope. Ruben Marsh. Sign here, please. Ruben scrawled his signature and took the envelope, closing the door before opening it. Inside was a stack of documents with a post-it note attached. Thought you should see these before court date. The first pages were bank statements showing transfers from their joint account to his personal account, annotated with Ava's neat handwriting indicating what the money had allegedly been for versus what Reuben had actually spent it on. Casino charges featured prominently. Next came a series of screenshots. Text messages between Reuben and various women, including Helen. Messages where he disparaged Ava, where he mentioned using funds from the business for personal expenses, where he detailed how he manipulated women into leaving their partners while maintaining his own options. The final document was a notice from the local business licensing authority indicating an audit of Reuben's refreshment bar's finances had been initiated based on discrepancies in tax filings. Cold sweat broke out on Reuben's forehead. How had Ava obtained all this? Some of it made sense. Joint accounts, old messages before he'd become more careful. But other elements suggested someone with serious technical skills had been gathering evidence. His phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Against his better judgment, Reuben answered. Mr. Marsh. Layla Johnston from the Seattle Times. I'm working on a story about fitness instructors who allegedly defrauded clients through your establishment in Greenwood Fitness. I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment before we publish. Reuben's heart hammered in his chest. There's been a misunderstanding. I haven't defrauded anyone. We have statements from 7 women who paid for personal training packages that were never fully delivered, the reporter continued, and documentation of a pattern where you appear to have targeted married women specifically. Would you care to address these allegations? Who gave you this information? Reuben demanded. This is slander. Actually, if published, it would be libel, the reporter corrected calmly. But we fact-checked thoroughly. We also have records indicating your business has been operating without proper permits for at least 10 months. Do you deny this? Reuben ended the call, his hands shaking. This wasn't just bad luck or Ava getting revenge. This was coordinated. Systematic. Someone was dismantling his life piece by piece. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Daniel Hardroth, Helen's boring, predictable mechanic husband. The man who fixed things for a living. The man Reuben had convinced Helen to abandon in a hospital bed. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Actions have consequences. This is just the beginning. Helen stared at the email from HR requesting a meeting first thing tomorrow morning. The message was vague, but mentioned concerns brought to the attention of management and company policy regarding personal conduct. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. It couldn't be about Daniel or Reuben. She'd been careful to keep her personal life separate from work, yet the timing was suspicious, coming after weeks of escalating disasters. First, Daniel's accident and his discovery of her affair. Then his disappearance from their lives. No contact despite her numerous calls and texts. Just divorce papers and a restraining order. The house locked against her. Half their savings gone. Then Reuben's troubles had started. His smoothie bar shut down, his position at the gym terminated, and now some journalists digging into his business practices. He'd turned cold, blaming her for his misfortunes, refusing to let her stay with him. She'd been sleeping on her sister's couch for 2 weeks, wearing borrowed clothes and fielding increasingly uncomfortable questions about where Daniel was and why she couldn't access their home. This can't be happening, Helen whispered to the empty break room. Her carefully constructed life, stable marriage, providing financial security, exciting affair, providing emotional thrills, had collapsed like a house of cards. Her phone buzzed with a text from Reuben. We need to talk. Now. Helen sighed and responded, I'm at work. Can't leave. They're going to fire you anyway. Trust me. A cold chill ran down Helen's spine. What are you talking about? Someone sent screenshots to your HR. Of us. The explicit ones. Helen's vision blurred with panic. The company had strict policies about moral conduct. The pictures Reuben mentioned would definitely qualify as violations. Who would do that? She texted back. Who do you think? Your husband is systematically destroying us. Helen shook her head, though Reuben couldn't see it. Daniel wouldn't. That's not how he operates. Wake up, Helen. The health inspectors. The gym firing me. the journalist. Now this, it's all connected. He's behind it. The break room door opened, and Helen quickly put her phone away. A coworker entered, gave her an uncomfortable glance, and promptly left without getting coffee. Word was spreading already. Helen gathered her things and hurried to the bathroom, locking herself in a stall before continuing her conversation with Reuben. If it is Daniel, what can we do? Reuben's response was immediate. Nothing. It's over. I can't see you anymore. What? You can't be serious. I'm about to lose everything, Helen. My business, my reputation. I can't afford any more negative attention. Helen stared at the screen in disbelief. After everything, after choosing Reuben over her husband, after risking her marriage and now her job, he was cutting her loose when things got difficult. So that's it. After all your promises, don't make this harder than it is. We had fun, but it's time to be practical. Tears welled in Helen's eyes, but they came from anger more than sadness. Practical is exactly what Daniel offered that you couldn't. Stability, loyalty, not running at the first sign of trouble. Yeah. Well, turns out boring Daniel isn't so boring after all. He's systematically burning our lives down. Good luck with the HR meeting tomorrow. Helen wanted to throw her phone against the wall. Instead, she took several deep breaths and typed, "Where did everything go so wrong?" Reuben's final message was brutally honest. When you didn't go to the hospital, that's when you lost the moral high ground. That's when he decided to destroy us instead of just divorcing you. And honestly, can't say I blame him. Helen leaned against the stall door, the truth of Reuben's words sinking in. She crossed a line that night, one that transformed Daniel from the dependable, forgiving husband she'd taken for granted into something else entirely. Someone capable of calculated, meticulous revenge. Her phone buzzed with a calendar notification. HR meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Below there was a text from her sister. Heard from a friend that Daniel's opening his own garage. He's moving on with his life. Maybe you should too. Helen closed her eyes. The weight of consequences finally settled fully on her shoulders. Daniel wasn't just moving on. He was systematically ensuring she and Reuben lost everything they valued before he did. And the worst part, a small voice inside her acknowledged he was right to do so. Elena's art studio smelled of fresh paint and coffee. Afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Daniel sat at a small round table, watching the door. The cast had come off his wrist last week. His ribs still ached occasionally, but the physical pain had largely subsided. The rest was a work in progress. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked, arranging 4 additional chairs around the table. "It's time," Daniel replied. "We've done what we set out to do." Tanner leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "She might not show." "She'll show," Daniel said with certainty. Helen hates unresolved situations more than anything. As if summoned by his words, the studio door opened. Helen stood in the entrance, hesitating. She looked thinner than Daniel remembered, dark circles under her eyes. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, which was unusual for her. "Daniel." His name on her lips sounded like a question. "Thank you for coming," he said formally, not rising from his chair. "Please, sit down." Helen approached cautiously, glancing at Tanner and Elena. "I thought we were meeting alone." "I never said that," Daniel replied. "And we're still waiting for 2 more people." As if on cue, the door opened again, and Ava entered. Seeing Helen, her expression hardened momentarily before settling into cool neutrality. She took a seat without speaking. Helen's eyes widened in recognition. "You're Reuben's wife." "Ex-wife, as of last week," Ava corrected. The divorce was finalized once he realized fighting would only expose more of his misdeeds. Helen looked from Ava to Daniel, comprehension dawning. "You've been working together, all of you." Before Daniel could respond, the door opened a final time. Frankie Mendes, their elderly neighbor, entered with a manila folder tucked under his arm. "Sorry I'm late," Frankie said, taking the last chair. Bus was running behind. Helen's confusion was evident. "Mr. Mendez, what are you doing here?" Frankie smiled kindly. "Providing evidence, Mrs. Hargrove. I've been keeping an eye on things for Daniel. Old habits from 40 years as a bus driver. You notice patterns when you watch the same streets every day." "What is this?" Helen asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Some kind of intervention? The public shaming?" "No," Daniel said calmly. "This is closure for all of us." He nodded to Ava, who opened her laptop, and turned it toward Helen. "These are text messages between Ruben and other women dating back 3 years. The same pattern he used with you. Compliments, private sessions, emotional manipulation, promises of a future together." She scrolled through several conversations. "He was seeing 2 other women while involved with you." Helen stared at the screen, color draining from her face. "How did you get these?" "Ruben used our shared cloud account for backups. Never bothered to change the password after I moved out." Elena picked up the narrative. "Ruben has a system, Helen. He targets women in stable relationships who crave excitement. He makes them feel special, understood. Then he isolates them from their support networks." She slid several files across the table. "These are complaints from clients who paid for fitness packages he never delivered. Women who later realized they were being groomed for affairs." Helen pushed the files away. "I don't need to see this. I already know Ruben is a liar. He abandoned me when things got difficult. Just as you abandoned Daniel when he needed you most," Tanner pointed out. Helen flinched, then turned to Daniel. "Is this what you wanted? To show me I made a mistake? To humiliate me? I've already lost everything. My job, my house, my reputation." "No," Daniel said quietly. "That's not why we're here." Frankie opened his folder and removed several photographs. "I took these over the past year. From my apartment window across from yours." He laid them out one by one. Images of Ruben's car parked on their street at times when Daniel was at work, Helen letting Ruben in through the back door, embraces in the kitchen visible through the window. "Your home," Frankie emphasized, looking at Daniel. "The sanctuary you built together, violated repeatedly." Helen's hands trembled. "Why are you showing me this? I know what I did." "Because you need to understand the magnitude of the betrayal," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Not just the affair, not just choosing him over me when I might have been dying, but bringing him into our home, making me unknowingly live in a space where you betrayed everything we built." For the first time, Helen seemed truly shaken. "I never thought of it that way." "That's the problem," Daniel said. "You never thought of anyone but yourself." Silence fell over the table. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows, a gentle, persistent rhythm. Finally, Daniel leaned forward and met Helen's eyes directly. "I survived. You didn't even come to see if I did." Helen's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I know what I did was unforgivable." "Is that what you want to hear? That I destroyed everything good in my life for someone who never cared about me at all?" "No," Daniel said. "What I want is for you to live with the consequences of your choices, just as I'm living with mine. What I want is for this chapter to end so we can all move forward." "Forward to what?" Helen asked bitterly. "You've taken everything." "I've taken nothing that wasn't mine, or that you didn't willingly sacrifice," Daniel corrected. "Your job. You lost that because Ruben's explicit messages violated company policy. Your reputation. You tarnished that yourself. Your home. I'm the one who bought it, who paid the mortgage, who fixed it up. You chose to leave. You chose to betray. You chose to prioritize someone else over your own husband, over your own marriage, over your own home. And now you have to live with those choices." Helen looked down at her hands, her voice barely a whisper. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did," Daniel said. "And now it's time to face the consequences. It's time to move on. It's time to let go of the past and build a new future, one where you learn from your mistakes and become a better person, One where you understand that actions have consequences, and that those consequences can't be undone. It's time to grow up, Helen. It's time to take responsibility for your actions and live with the choices you've made. And it's time to let go of the past and move forward, no matter how painful it might be. That was damaged by your association with a man now known locally for fraudulent business practices and predatory behavior. The house. We'll sell it and split the proceeds as the divorce agreement specifies. Ava closed her laptop. I didn't come here for revenge, Helen. I came because Ruben hurt us both, and understanding that is part of healing. Elena nodded. When Mark died, I wanted someone to blame. But sometimes, there's no villain, just people making choices that hurt others. Recognizing that is the first step toward rebuilding. Helen looked around the table, seeming to truly see each person for the first time. You've all been part of this. This calculated response to what I did. Justice, Tanner said simply. Not revenge. Everything that's happened to you and Ruben has been the natural consequence of your own actions being brought to light. Daniel stood, signaling the meeting was coming to an end. The divorce will be final in 60 days. The house goes on the market next week. Your things have been packed and are in storage. The access information is with your sister. Helen wiped her tears with the back of her hand. And that's it. We're done. We were done the moment you chose not to come to the hospital. Daniel said, the words holding no bitterness now, just finality. This meeting isn't about us. It's about everyone understanding why things happened the way they did, so we can all move on. Helen nodded slowly, gathering her purse. At the door, she paused and turned back. For what it's worth, Daniel, I'm sorry. Not just because I lost everything, but because I hurt you. You deserved better. Daniel didn't respond, but he held her gaze steadily until she turned and left. As the door closed behind her, he felt the weight lift. Not completely, but noticeably. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of something like peace. 2 days later, Daniel stood in the unfinished space that would soon become Hardrove Auto Repair. Sawdust covered the concrete floor, and the smell of fresh paint filled the air. Tanner was installing security cameras, while Elena measured wall space for the artwork she created for the waiting area. Delivery for Ms. Moss. Called a voice from the door. A courier held out a tablet for Elena to sign. What's this? She asked, accepting a thick envelope. Legal documents, ma'am. Have a good day. Elena opened the envelope, her eyes widening as she read. It worked, she said, looking up at Daniel and Tanner. The silent investor gambit worked. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. So you're officially part owner of Ruben's refreshment bar. Was, Elena corrected, passing him the documents. The business has been liquidated following the extended closure and failed health inspections. As 25% owner, I was entitled to call a vote, which the other investors supported once they saw the financial irregularities we uncovered. Tanner whistled low. And the proceeds transferred to Ava as part of her settlement. As agreed, Elena confirmed. Apparently, when Ruben saw the legal documents proving my ownership stake, he didn't even contest it. Just signed everything over and walked away. He knew he was beaten. Daniel said, reviewing the paperwork, every avenue of escape had been closed. It's almost poetic, Elena observed. He lost his business, his reputation, his financial stability, everything he used to lure women away from their partners. Daniel handed the documents back to Elena. And Ava's using her settlement to open a daycare center. She's already found a location in Ballard. Elena smiled. She sent a text earlier, said for the first time in years, she's excited about the future. Tanner finished mounting the last camera and climbed down from the ladder. So that's it. Mission accomplished. Daniel looked around the space that represented his own fresh start. The most important thing was never punishing them, he said thoughtfully. It was making sure they couldn't keep hurting people the way they hurt us. Justice with interest, Elena said, echoing his words from weeks earlier, and a chance for everyone to rebuild. Daniel nodded, feeling the rightness of it settle in his chest. The cold clarity that had sustained him through his recovery and through the systematic dismantling of Helen and Reuben's deceptions had transformed into something else, a quiet determination to build something better from the ruins. Rebuilt on stronger foundations, he agreed. 3 months later, the bell above the door jangled as a customer entered Hardroth Auto Repair. Daniel looked up from the engine he was diagnosing and nodded to Tanner, who manned the front desk when not making furniture deliveries. "Welcome to Hardroth's," Tanner called cheerfully. "How can we help you?" The woman explained her car was making a strange noise when turning left. As Tanner took down her information, Daniel returned his attention to the engine. A classic Mustang with a timing issue that most shops had misdiagnosed. He promised the owner it would be running perfectly by the weekend, and Daniel Hardroth didn't break promises. The garage had been open for just over 2 months, but already they had a steady stream of customers, many referred by his former boss, who'd been understanding about Daniel's departure. "Always knew you'd open your own place someday," he'd said. "Just thought Helen would be more supportive of the idea." The divorce had been finalized a month ago. The house had sold quickly, providing Daniel with additional capital for the business. He lived in the apartment above the garage, small but functional, with large windows that let in plenty of light. Elena had helped him furnish it, her artist's eye bringing warmth to the space without unnecessary clutter. At noon, the door chimed again. Elena entered carrying a tray from the art studio and cafe she'd opened next door. "Lunch delivery," she announced. "Sandwiches from a new deli on Westlake." Daniel wiped his hands and joined Tanner at the small table in the corner that served as their break area. Elena set out the food, then pulled up a chair. "How's the class coming along?" Daniel asked. Elena had started teaching art therapy sessions 2 evenings a week, focusing on people working through grief and major life transitions. "Full registration," she replied with quiet pride. "Had to start a waiting list for the next session." "Not surprised," Tanner said around a mouthful of sandwich. "You've got that magical combination of talent and not making people feel silly for having feelings." Elena laughed. "That might be the strangest compliment I've ever received, but I'll take it." They ate companionably, discussing weekend plans and local news. No mention of Helen or Reuben. Those conversations had naturally faded over time, not through avoidance, but because life had simply moved forward. Daniel had heard through mutual friends that Helen had moved to Portland for a fresh start. Reuben had apparently left Seattle entirely, heading to Southern California, where his particular brand of fitness enthusiasm might find a more receptive audience. Neither fact elicited strong emotion in Daniel anymore, just a distant acknowledgement, like noting changes in the weather. After lunch, as Elena gathered the wrappings, she mentioned casually, "Frankie's stopping by later. Says he has news." Daniel nodded. Since the confrontation at Elena's studio, Frankie had become a regular presence in their lives, stopping by the garage with coffee, joining them occasionally for dinner, offering gentle wisdom wrapped in neighborhood gossip. "I'll make sure I'm free," Daniel promised. Later that afternoon, the elderly man arrived, moving more slowly with his cane than usual. "The rain makes my joints complain," Frankie explained as Daniel pulled up a chair for him in the office. "Small price to pay for the wisdom of years, I suppose." "What's this news Elena mentioned?" Daniel asked, pouring coffee from the pot they kept brewing for customers. "Ah, yes." Frankie accepted the cup gratefully. "I've been offered a position with the neighborhood association, sort of a community watchdog role, keeping an eye on local businesses, reporting code violations, that sort of thing." Daniel smiled. "Sounds perfect for someone with your observational skills." "That's the thing," Frankie said, leaning forward slightly. "I recommended you for the business development committee. They need someone with integrity and practical know-how." "Me?" Daniel was surprised. "I've only been open a couple months." "It's not about how long you've been in business," Frankie said. "It's about character. After what happened with that smoothie shop fellow, all those violations that went unreported for so long, The association wants business owners who understand the importance of doing things right. He sipped his coffee. Besides, you've lived in this neighborhood for years. You care about it. Daniel considered the offer. Before, with Helen, community involvement had always taken a back seat to her social preferences. She'd wanted to be seen at the right events, not commit to the unglamorous work of neighborhood improvement. "I'd be honored," he told Frankie. "When's the first meeting?" "Thursday evening. I can pick you up if you'd like." "I'd appreciate that." After Frankie left, Tanner poked his head into the office. Committee man now, huh? Getting all respectable and civic-minded. Despite the teasing tone, pride was evident in his voice. Daniel shrugged. "Seems like a good way to give back. Make sure what happened with Reuben's place doesn't happen again." "From justice to prevention," Tanner observed. "Evolution and action." Daniel considered his brother's words as he returned to the Mustang. There was truth there. He had evolved. The cold determination to see justice done had thawed, revealing something more constructive underneath, something focused on building rather than dismantling. As he worked, Daniel glanced around the garage. His garage, clean, well organized, every tool in its place. Through the side window, he could see into Elena's studio, where she was helping a customer choose between framed prints. Life continuing, growing, rebuilding. Not despite the past, but incorporating its lessons. When he'd left that note on the hospital pillow, "You chose him, now live with it," Daniel had been speaking to Helen. But in a way, he'd been speaking to himself too. He'd chosen this path of quiet strength, of principled action, rather than bitter recrimination. And now he was living with it, in the best possible sense. Rain pattered against the windows of Daniel's apartment above the garage. He and Frankie sat on the small balcony beneath the overhang, protected from the downpour, while still enjoying the fresh, clean scent it brought to the air. "Neighborhood committee likes your proposal for the summer street fair," Frankie said, sipping from a mug of coffee. "Auto safety checks for the kids' bicycles was a nice touch." "Seemed practical," Daniel replied. "And it's good advertising for the shop." 6 months had passed since Hardroth Auto Repair had opened its doors. Business was steady, growing mainly through word-of-mouth referrals. Daniel had hired a part-time mechanic last month and was considering bringing on an apprentice. Across the street, Elena's art studio was hosting an evening class. Through the large windows, Daniel could see her moving among students, offering guidance with gentle gestures. The space had become a community hub of sorts, showcasing local artists, hosting classes, and providing a meeting place for various neighborhood initiatives. "You've built something good here," Frankie observed, following Daniel's gaze. "All of you have." Daniel nodded. The satisfaction of creation far outweighed the lingering echoes of destruction. The systematic dismantling of Helen and Reuben's deception seemed distant now, like something that happened to someone else. He still believed in consequences and justice, but his focus had shifted to what could be built, rather than what had been broken. His phone buzzed on the small table between them. Daniel glanced at the screen and frowned slightly. A message from Helen. The first in nearly 2 months. Read, "I lost everything. Please just talk to me." Daniel picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the delete button. There was no anger anymore, just a quiet certainty that some bridges, once burned, should remain crossed only in memory. He deleted the message without responding. "Bad news?" Frankie asked, noting Daniel's expression. "Old news," Daniel corrected, setting the phone down. "Not worth revisiting." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the rain wash the city clean. Streetlights reflected in puddles, creating constellations on the wet pavement. "Some people see rain and think it ruins the day," Daniel said after a while. "I think it just washes everything fake away." Frankie nodded, understanding the layers in Daniel's words. "Leaves only what's solid enough to remain standing." Exactly. Beyond the rain, life continued. Tanner was coming for dinner later, bringing food from the new Thai place that had opened where Reuben's smoothie bar once stood. Elena would join them after her class, probably with a bottle of wine and stories about her students' progress. Small moments of connection, genuine and unforced. Daniel had survived. Not just the accident, but the betrayal that had followed, and had transformed it into something constructive rather than consuming. The empty hospital bed had become a turning point rather than an endpoint. As twilight deepened and the rain continued its steady rhythm, Daniel felt the last pieces settle into place. Not perfection, certainly, but something real, something honest, something that could weather future storms without washing away.